Namaste, viewers, and welcome to another episode of Amazing Vedas with Dr. Pariksith Singh. Thank you, Dr. Singh, for joining us. We ended on a very tantalizing note last time about what happened to the Vedic deities and why are most of them not worshipped anymore, at least in the forms that they were, and why have they been supplanted by other deities? Now, after you put out your tweet on X, I started thinking about it as well. And I reflected on some parallels, you see. First of all, Zeus in the Greek world, then who becomes Jupiter or Jove in the Roman religion or mythology, and Indra. So last time we said how as it were, the king of the gods, the king of the deities who reside in heaven was Indra, and he was a usurper and so forth. So that later Indra, the Puranic Indra, is akin to Jupiter and Zeus. He's not the Vedic Indra. See, that is one point that I had to make or offer. The other point that I had to also make is that something happened all over the world. As you said, that Vedic wisdom or Gnosticism is a part of a universal tradition, Sri Aurobindo tells us, which then gets supplanted. So what happens? The classical religions emerge, the Abrahamic religions, when there is one transcendental deity. And the questions they ask is the same. Okay, the sun is the deity, the moon is the deity. But who made the sun? Who made the moon? That sort of thing. And in our tradition, in the Sanatani tradition, we have a parallel. The parallel is when you move from the Vedas to the Upanishads, the age of the Vedas to the age of the Upanishads, the so-called overarching deity of the Upanishads is Brahman. It's not Agni, it's not Surya, it is not Savitur, it is not Indra, it is not Brahmanaspati, not the Ashwins, not Saraswati, not Paravak, not Ushas, not Ratri, these beautiful Vedic deities whom, Aditi, Diti, we've talked about several of them. These wonderful deities, which, in my opinion, they're so extraordinary and at least so human friendly. This is what I think. Those deities disappear, and you have this transcendental, non form deity called Brahman. It's not a deity, it's beyond worship, it's beyond the mind. We talked about the mind last time, right? So that's the intermediate phase. And then what happens? And this is what I want to come to. Think about Agni. We've talked about Agni. And what do? You say, Agni, Yahi, come, more Agni. So what you're doing is you're creating the sacrificial ground, right? And you're invoking the deities, you're lighting the sacred fire, which receives the oblation. And through the oblation, you invoke these grand powers and deities. And then what happens? Gone is the Agnya of that kind. And you have the temple. And what happens in the temple? There's a Garbhagriha with a permanent presence of the deity who is bathed and clothed and fed and woken and put to sleep and so on and so forth. So anthropomorphic, anthropocentric. तो क्या हो रहा है? If I were to use Hindi, you've captured the deity. आपने तो कब्जा कर लिया. Whereas the Vedas never allowed you to capture the deity. You had to invoke it. It was through your fire, your tapasya, your sincerity. And what was the oblation, as you clarified? It was the Havi and the, Gritam. It was all yourself. It was your spirit. That ghee was your own spirit. So from there, you want to capture the deity. And next, after capturing the deity, you have a priest as an intermediary, you see. So indeed, there has been, as it were, a series of substitutions, which has unfortunately taken us away from our source, as it were. Because, as I was saying last time, Svarga, you see that Ga means to go towards. So when you go towards that realm of Swa or Swara, which is also the Saur, the solar realm or the realm of Surya or Savitur, that Swa, Ra is shining. So it is really the self shining realm. In other words, heaven or Swarga is the own illumined, self shining realm of the self realized person or the person who has understood that the psychic potencies and powers of the universe are within themselves.
Very well said. The other thing you will see is there's a splitting that has happened. And in the Upanishads, although they are beautiful, they're intuitive, the focus is more towards consciousness. See, Shiva and Shakti, what we call now, or Purusha and Prakriti, of course, with Sankhya. But before that, um, there was an understanding of male and female, but male was not so exclusively identified with pure consciousness. Female was not exclusively identified with the Prakriti. If you look at the Devi Suktam in the 10th Mandala, 125th Suktam, she assumes everyone and everything in her vision. And yet, if you move to the Purusha Suktam, Purusha assumes everything. There was the line between the female and the male, as in consciousness and manifest world, was not so clear cut. Then Upanishads start moving towards pure consciousness, as you said, the Brahman, and there's a split. Now, there was Tantra, powerful in its own place. The maternal respect, the that seems to have gone away. Although we did try to establish it, Tantra became kind of degenerated itself. You will find very few paths or panthas that brought them as one together again. You will see that not even in Sri Krishna, because Sri Krishna is Narayana, who is even above Vyakta, and Vyakta, who's even whose energy the Para Prakriti is. So Narayana is above, even though Narayana is beyond any gender or beyond any consciousness or the manifestation of consciousness. But later we definitely see a split with Shankara, of course, with Buddhism. And may not have been intended, but almost seems a focus more on the consciousness aspect. Now you've had the Nath Sampradaya. I think I'm not an expert on it. Kashmir Shaivism, of course, Sri Ramakrishna, even Swami Vivekananda initially had a hard time accepting the oneness of these two. And then, of course, Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. So you will see that we our approach, yes, of course, it became intellectualized. It was still very intuitive in the Upanishads, but even in that intuitive approach, that living sense of a multi-dimensional universe, that started disappearing. And there was a writer, I don't know if you remember him, James, and he, of course, came from a Western perspective. He was, I think, a psychologist. He said, uh, at that
William James, he was
no,
he,
James, Jaynes, James, and he wrote it on the gods. And he said that to these, at that in that culture, he talked more about the Western, the Greek culture. These gods were living. These guys saw those gods. But then he again, Western approach, the modern approach. This is schizophrenic approach, and obviously the modern mind is better. I would go to a pre-schizophrenic approach, as a mind that was not split, but a mind that was integrated, where the Daivik was not separate from the Bhautik, was not separate from the Adhyatmic. And in that aspect, I think you have pointed it out very well. The separations that started happening, they did not, still there was an approach that was full of awe, wonder, in innocence, almost like a child, but a purity and a lot of energy. And that was that an assimilative approach would bring in things together. And I think Sri Krishna did try later to bring it together, but again, that was at the end of the age, and he kind of left us a message for us to try to carry on. But definitely a shift had happened, and you can see that. You can see that shift in mythology. You can see that split in linguistics, the language itself, how we approach language, how we express language. The poetry has changed. The Vedic poetry can be very confusing until you find that subtle clue. the very mode of expression, the mode in how we use the devices, how the symbols come together with the words. The words were symbols. I mean, so the words had multiple meanings, and one word could did not only had multiple meanings. For the same object you had multiple words emphasizing one quality of that object. It was a very interesting, different world than ours. So we do adhyasa on it. When we try to define it, we try to, as you said, capture the Veda. We try to do the same thing with the Veda. It slips out of our fingers because it is not so easily. You cannot slice it. You cannot take an apple and slice it. Okay, and this is what an apple is, the cross section. If I may borrow an image used by our famous physicist whose name escapes me right now, a great teacher. So we have to go back to that multidimensionality, that fourth dimension that we miss in our present world, which is a living dimension. And you are in that dimension constantly. And I think Indra is our clue to that missing dimension. And even look at Agni. Look at how alive Agni is, and Agni is in multiple levels. All these are symbols, devas, energies that we can reapproach and try to uncover our own multidimensionality, our own childlike innocence that does not close the world but opens it.
Yes, yes. So just like we were talking about the shifts, I think that there is also a common, you might say, trope or theme or idea or metaphor, across the world religions, which is the idea of the fall. Now, you have it very well established and instantiated in the Christian, tradition where Adam and Eve are driven out of the Garden of Eden. So something happened, Either you can say there was a fall from that unified vision to dualism, the mind fell. So this shift has been characterized as a kind of fall in many traditions. Now, in our own tradition, however, we never quite fully accepted the idea of the fall, though we had the notion of the golden age, the Satyug, and all that. We tried to say that there's always a living connection with that age. There's always a living avatar, or there's always a living golden age within us. And so we never wanted to fully accept the idea of the fall. Now, the reason I'm saying all this is because when we, put out one of our videos, somebody commented, they picked out a passage from the agenda of the mother and said that all the religions of the past have been life denying and have promised, either a heaven afterwards, or they have talked about this world as an illusion. And I said to myself, but go back to the Vedas. There is no illusionism, there is no negationism, nor is there any hint that this earthly existence is full of sorrows and that dukkha rules the world, right? Therefore, once again, this idea of the fall, the idea of the disconnection with our original unity is a later idea. And that is why even the mother wants to go back in time, down into the cave of inconscience. So she mentions in that very passage going into the cave of the Panis to recover something, you see? So you want to recover that original direction of creation, which in a way, in the Gnostic Gospels, they say the demiurge usurped, that a similar figure like Indra, and they call it Jehovah. That is to say that those who believe that knowledge is evil, I mean, those who believe that obedience is the only way for humanity, those who believe that human beings are sinners. Now, all of those ideas come from the demiurge who sort of takes over from the original impulse of creation where man was made in God's image, and that, we were children of immortality, which is what the Veda says, literally, right? Amritasya putraha. So, what I'm trying to say is across different traditions in the world, there is the idea of the fall. Only in Sanatan Dharma, the idea of the fall is not taken to be a settled fact. which cannot be unsettled. We want to continue. We want to see the continuous stream of wisdom. And therefore, what I'm trying to say is that when we go back to the Vedas, we have no trace of notions of life being dukkha, or this world being an illusion, or that we are born sinners, or in fact, even that we are given to death. All these ideas come later after some sort of fall. On the contrary, the Vedic world is full of wonder, awe, power, effort, and this tremendous, heroic, I would say, you know, quest for everlasting, whatever you might want to say, success, fame. And we are all told that we are born heroes. We are meant to exceed ourselves, you see. And that is why I think that, at least for me, going back to the Vedas with the clues given to us by Sri Aurobindo has made so many things much clearer than they ever were before, including our daily struggle. When we say Dharma Kshetre, Kurukshetre, yes, this is a Dharma Kshetra, this is a Kurukshetra, and we must take sides, and we must be with the forces of light and not with the forces of darkness. And Indra is our great friend. So over to you for your concluding thoughts, Dr. Singh.
Just a couple more things. See, even in the Veda, the transcendence is not transcendent. Transcendence is immanent. So even the sun is very much here. The relation is whatever is closest to us, whatever we can feel, whatever we can live. It starts with Agni and then Soma and then Vayu, and it expands. But constantly they are here. In this loka, they're all present, they're active, following the rules of this loka. You can move to another loka and follow that loka's rules, but everyone is here. That's the difference. When we see the split, the transcendent becomes truly transcendent. In fact, so transcendent that all our weaknesses, deficiencies do not touch that. And that has been a big theological problem in Christianity. You will see that in your when Ramanujacharya comes and he tries to separate them. So again, you see that in that his approach of Vedanta itself, and then Madhvacharya, complete separation between Narayana and the Jiva. So Vishisht Advaita comes because of the separation. Second, the separation was between the individual and the universal. And when I read these, I feel almost like a universal aspiration happening, and the Rishi is not separate from the universal. The Agni is not just my Agni. The Agni surrounds me from all sides. Maho Arnaha Saraswati Prachetayati Ketunaha Dhiyo Vishwa Viraajati. Right? So the whole universe, all the thoughts of the universe, she rules. Or when Indra at the end of the fourth suktam comes, he is the Avanir Mahan. The whole universe is meditating together. And that's why we come to a great revelation where we say Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Today, when we say Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, think about it. Do you really feel it? No. For them, it was real. It was one world, one family. We are, okay, you are my family, but not really because I am me. That is the split that has happened. Anyway, I'll give it back to you, but great, fascinating discussion. I learned a lot while we were talking. I was hearing and so impactful. This is a beautiful revelation for me too.
Wonderful. We'll take it forward. Viewers, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel and join us in our journey to discover the Vedas. I guarantee you it's going to add something to your life. With these words, thank you, viewers. Until next time, namaste.